One.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Mullen. I'm the acting chair of the panel for the comprehensive permit for 582 Blue Hill Avenue. We'll call to order our. Let me see. I'm keeping track here. 15th. This is the 15th session that we've had, and with me tonight are Giselle Joffer and Frank O'Brien, members. I see members of the board. I see the applicant and his team are here. So I'm going to start the hearing. Let me say, since the last hearing last Wednesday, we did receive one email from a Mr. Nick Goby of 45 Meeting House Lane discussing particularly groundwater on Meeting House Lane. This hearing, as we discussed last week, was called to specifically discuss the progress being made on the drainage system. We talked about whether Mr. Burke and his team would have it complete, shared with Mr. Reardon for the purpose of providing comments. So I'd like to hear from the applicant on that. I'll also share with the applicant that the board has received some level of frustration. The board's not frustrated, but it's received comments about frustration about not seeing the work done in advance. So I'll let you know. You may hear some of that tonight. I don't know. But I'll let you know that I do have one email on that topic. So Mr. Schomer, maybe you could give us an update on where you are, and we can discuss what tonight's discussion is about.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And good evening to you and the members of the board and members of the public. For the record, my name is Attorney Jesse Schomer, attorney for the applicant. By way of update, Mr. Chair, we do have our civil engineer on the line, Jim Burke, and I see it looks like Sean Reardon is here tonight from Tetra Tech as well. So perhaps these gentlemen can provide an update regarding the stormwater system. But I don't want to speak for either of them, but I think we're getting closer to a design that I believe there's a consensus between the two of them, or we're getting closer to that. So I think they'll be able to talk to you in greater depth about that and where they are and what the timing of that is. To your point, Mr. Chair, on the issue of pre-filing documents, we're certainly sensitive to that, and we will get these filed with the board so that and filed with Beverly so that they can be posted on the website as soon as they're ready. Absolutely, as soon as they're ready. We didn't want to pre-file anything tonight because these are still being worked out between the engineers, and frankly, we're waiting for the architectural plans to get feedback from Mr. Bomer. On that note, Mr. Chair, since we were last before you last week, Embark Architecture has gone back and taken another look at their plan and done a further revision to that, and that includes a proposed reduction of the north building and a shifting of the mass on that. And we've sent a sketch and a concept plan to Mr. Bomer to try to get some feedback on that. But I understand he may have had surgery earlier this week, so I think he's been unavailable to give comment on that. So we're hopeful to hear back from Mr. Bomer as soon as possible on that and have something more substantive for the board on that topic, perhaps by the next meeting. But we're ready tonight, I think, to go into at least some of the update on stormwater.
Okay, so I think an update's appropriate. I don't want to have a long discussion on stormwater unless the design is done. It's way too confusing to follow all of the machinations of the stormwater. So I'm specifically not going to permit a conversation about the stormwater unless the design is done. We will we'll hear an update, which is fine, but I feel like we've been down this road before, and I'd like to have, and I think we asked for this before, a completed design, an opportunity for people to look at it, and we can discuss it. So with that said, I'm pleased to hear from the applicant on where we are, but I don't want to design this over Zoom.
Yeah, understood, Mr. Chair. And to be frank, it's not finally done, and that's the reason why we didn't file any plans with you in advance of tonight. There are still some details.
I think that's fine. I'm just letting Mr. Burke know that we're not looking for a detailed presentation. He can provide an update, and we can go from there. But since this is the whole purpose of why this session was called, I'm not sure there's going to be a whole lot to talk about. But Mr. Burke, you have the floor. Why don't you give us an update on where you are and what we can expect?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Jim Burke with Sell Burke Saller and Associates offices in Quincy. We started revising the stormwater controls after a letter from Mr. Reardon of Tetra Tech. Also, some conversations that we've had about the design. And what I've done is kind of separated out the infiltration and detention from each other. So now we're doing infiltration in separate structures. We're doing detention in separate structures. We have a surface detention basin in the lower right-hand corner towards the intermittent stream in the wetland buffer. We have a design that have flow rates. Mr. Reardon had a chance to have a look at it. And I believe he believes that it's trending in the right direction. It's not complete yet. I think we're looking to do a few more revisions to the layout, specifically related to parking, reducing more impervious area. That'll allow the stormwater structures to operate more effectively, reduce the amount of infiltration required and the like. So, and I agree with him. It's a better design with his input, and we will continue to meet the 10 stormwater standards as required. Like I said, we're trending in the right direction. I have a plan that Mr. Reardon has seen. I can certainly share my screen and share that with you if that's something you would be interested in. But like I say, we still have a few items to address. I think in the end, what's going to happen is just making sure that the existing infrastructure is capable of handling of what we're proposing.
What's your expected schedule for completing the design?
Well, with it kind of hinges on with regards to the architectural plans, as well as making sure that we have the parking, the pavement areas correct. So if we're reducing impervious areas, the drainage itself could remain the same as long as it can fit within the footprint of the limit of work that what's going to be originally, ultimately proposed. And it will just work a little bit more effectively. So it's hard for me to say. I'd say they're all interrelated. So Mr. Boehmer's input with the architect will have an impact on when I finish the drainage.
Okay, so are we weeks away? Is that fair? I mean, the reason I ask is we have pending town presentations. I don't want the presentations from the town to be done until the design is done and the application's been finished. So I'm looking at not just at Mr. Burke, but also at Mr. Schumer. I'm wondering what your guidance is on the continuation of this hearing without the information necessary to complete it.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that I don't believe we have a meeting in the book for next Wednesday. If the board has availability, I think we'll be farther along, and I'm going to continue to push our team to work as quickly as possible. And we are doing our level best to get this back and get this turned around as quickly as we can, being mindful of our conversation at the last couple of meetings that we want to get this right. And we're sensitive to the importance of this, in particular, the drainage on the site.
Well, I have no doubt that you're pushing it. So are you suggesting that we have a meeting next week, and at that point you'd be presenting both the revised site design and a completed water and sewer and drainage program, or what are we talking about? So what I'm struggling with is we then have to make sure that the peer review consultants have an opportunity to look at that. The neighbors are going to want time to look at it and respond, and I think we can address that through a separate hearing. And I want to have the town have an opportunity to look at it. So we've got the town a little bit on deck here. So we do have next Wednesday open. I agree with that, but do you think you'd be ready for a full hearing at that point, Mr. Schumer?
I'm going to turn that question on to Mr. Burke and Mr. Reardon. I know that they're both extremely busy at the moment, and Mr. Reardon's firm, I believe, is doing peer review for the other pending 40Bs in town. So I don't want to promise anything that they can't deliver on.
Yeah, I'll let him answer that. But what I heard from Mr. Burke is that it's somewhat a function of third-party urban design and modifications to the impervious soil. So we've got a bit of a backup here. The drainage, what I'm hearing is the drainage design can't be done until the site design is finished.
That's fairly accurate.
Yeah.
Fairly accurate. That's what you said.
Yes, that's accurate.
That's accurate. Yeah. Okay. So I'll look to the applicant. How do you want to proceed?
Just to drill down on a little more detail there, Mr. Chair. The reason why the stormwater can't be finalized until the architecture is finalized, because what we're proposing now and what we're showing to Mr. Bomer to try to get his feedback is a smaller footprint for that building and a revised.
I understand. That's clear. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
I'm not blaming people. I'm just saying that, this is, I don't want to continue to meet on Wednesdays for the purpose of scheduling further Wednesdays.
I understand.
Which feels like what we're doing. And that's not productive use of the town's time. So that's all.
Understood.
So you tell me, what are we looking at? What can we expect? All in light of the 180-day deadline that we're under as well.
I'm certainly cognizant of that, and I don't want to get things too close to that deadline.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, because the progress on the stormwater is being held up somewhat by the architecture, and that is somewhat in the air because of Mr. Bomer's health condition. Maybe I would suggest 2 weeks. Maybe we'll take a week off next week if that's acceptable to the board, not to see us for 1 week.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I would prefer not to waste my time. So, I understand the importance of getting this right. I'm a little peeved, to be honest with you. But I understand that it's about the board and the process and everything else. So I'd like a realistic schedule. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm not interested in meeting on Wednesdays to schedule further Wednesdays, to reschedule even further Wednesdays.
Ms. Joffrey.
So, Mr. Chair, it would be helpful for me just to understand where things stand with respect to, I think an offer was put on the table for like a working or planning session, I think it's called. And then last time there was also sort of a call, I'd say, from various participants in the hearing for maybe a fairly drastic change in the current plans. And so I think, not really answering your question, but sort of as a foundational matter, I could use some recentering or reorienting with respect to that.
Okay. All right, I'll address that in a second. I just want to make a couple notes. Here's what I understand. The applicant's committed to a massing plan that we haven't seen. So I'll remind the applicant that they owe us that. That's point one. Point two is, I had suggested that based on Mr. Bomer's presentation or peer review of the site civil, or not the site civil, I'm sorry, the core design, that it seemed to me that the project was looking for, or the feedback that they were getting from the peer reviewers would require another grand gesture. So this is the phrase I used. I'm gathering tonight that the applicant is working on something that feels to me a little bit like that gesture, in that they're modifying the design of the building. I don't know how it's being modified, but certainly Mr. Bowman focused on modifications of that north building. So we'll leave it to them we want to hear from them on that. And I think that's central to the next point, which is the applicant committed to a working session, but only after there was a fundamental agreement on the base design, I think. At least he said that he thought that they were more productive once you had some basic agreement on the fundamental elements. So I think each of those 3 points, it continues to be in play. And I don't know that we'll know the results of that until we see the modifications to the design of the property. That's what it feels like to me. And then following that, we would hear from Mr. Burke and the revised drainage and water and sewer modifications that are necessary, the new design, peer review from Mr. Reardon, follow-up peer review comment from any of the design that's been revised, and then presentation from the town. So that's kind of the order of things that I see. And in the middle of that, to the extent that a working session or a tabletop exercise or whatever you'd like to talk, whatever you'd like to mention, could be scheduled to the extent that the applicant was willing and interested to do that. Is that pretty much, Mr. Schomer, where we are?
It is, Mr. Chair, and I can update you on that. That was on my to discuss list, so I'm glad you brought that up, Ms. Joffer. Since our last hearing, I did reach out to Judy Barrett to open a dialogue with respect to starting the process of setting up the working session. And my understanding, I know Judy's not here tonight, so I won't talk out of school, but my understanding from what she foresees for that process would be our development team meeting with the peer reviewers and other members of the town departments, probably the DPW, the fire chief, and anyone else that is deemed necessary. Mr. Zerwinski, I believe, would be involved as well. And typically the way that I've done these kind of sessions, at least in the past, has been to have one member of the zoning board be present for those. Obviously, you couldn't have 2 or even 3 because that would be an open meeting law issue. But the one member could be available to offer their feedback and commentary, and then report back to the full board during the next session of the public hearing. So we're absolutely open to those. It's a great resource to be able to drill down on particular technical details, especially where they involve multiple disciplines and you really want to get feedback from more than one person. And it's tough to do that when you're doing these kind of presentations and then going back and emailing, and it just makes it much easier to do if you're all in the same room, or in these times in the same Zoom room.
Ms. Joffer.
Thank you both, Mr. Chair, Mr. Schomer. That's helpful. I also agree that we should try to be efficient about time, and appreciate that this is an iterative process, but I don't know, it's becoming too much now. So I think what would be helpful would just be to have the sort of the best design and grand gesture be the next one and schedule the next meeting for whenever it's reasonable to have that on the table and move from there.
Yeah, okay. I support that. I feel like we should do that now, though, for the continuity of the hearing. I'd like to recommend to the board that we recess tonight, that we recess this hearing until the 5th.
Mr. Chairman, may I interrupt to point out that the town meeting is the week of May 3rd?
Great. Okay, so that's not a good date. So we would go to the 12th. The 12th, is that right? Thank you, Kathleen.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's good. It's good to know. I wasn't, I mean, I'm aware of that, but I forgot. I just saw the warrant.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. It's like
It looks like a
Bible.
long meeting.
Yeah, it won't be over in one night, I don't think.
Yeah. May 12th, Mr. Schomer.
That's very good, Mr. Chair. That's more than enough time, I think, for our professionals to work with the town's consultants and have a very, very solid plan, I think. And I'll be in touch with my team and make sure that is our directive, and we are to get those to you as soon as possible.
Yeah. So this is what I think we would expect. Modification of the, to the extent that you're proposing it, to the base design. Update on the drainage design, and providing that both of those designs to the members of the public and our peer review team as soon as possible so that they can get working on their work and perhaps even provide some feedback when we do meet on the 12th. We'd also like to see the massing study based on the revised design. And then a proposal from you as to how you would like to proceed with, not you, Mr. Schumer, was Mr. Tamposi, the applicant, let's say, how you'd like to proceed with some type of more detailed design review session, which I do think is helpful. I think there's 1,000 details that can improve this project that don't lend themselves nicely to a public hearing, as you said, but critically important, I think, to make projects better. So is there an objection from the members? So Mr. Schomer, that's what we would expect. And I'm particularly focused on giving people ample time to review so that they can be prepared. Once we get through that on the 12th, Mr. Zawinski, if you could let the town officials know that they'll be on deck sometime during the month of May, excuse me, to make presentations. It includes the planning board, the historical commission, DPW, police, fire, whomever would like to make presentations to us toward the end of May. And then we can begin to consider the conclusion of this hearing. That will, however, bring us close to June 8th, which is the last day to close the hearing. So Mr. Schomer, I'm going to need a proposal from you on, which doesn't need to be done in a hearing, but I would like a proposal from you as to the appropriate time to continue the hearing consistent with the 180-day requirement. I'd like you to share that with Mr. Hill and share that with the members, and then we'll consider that when we come back on the 12th.
Understood.
How does that sound?
All sounds very fair. And just to return to a point that Ms. Joffer made a moment ago about the iterative process, and I realize that it is frustrating.
She's quoting you when she does that, just so you know.
I'm actually going to blame Mr. Brown for that one. I believe that's his word, the iterative process. I see he's not on the Zoom, so I can throw that blame in his direction. It is our intent also for this to be the last iteration. I'm cognizant that people are getting frustrated and they want to see what this plan is going to be in the end, and I think we're getting close. And the reason why D'Artagnan's not here tonight with a concept plan is just because he and Mr. Bomer, for reasons that was not within anyone's control, weren't able to connect. And so we want to be able to do that and come back with a plan that it has a consensus between the two architects and as well as between the engineers, similar to how last week went, where there was more or less a consensus between the traffic engineers. I find in the peer review process that it's most helpful to come back once those professionals have resolved any issues and come to a consensus and can report that to the board. So that's our aim, and we will be shooting for that by the 12th.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schomer. For those wondering why we're not scheduling times on anything other than Monday, I'm sorry, a Wednesday, we don't have access to the Zoom platform due to the scheduling of the other Board of Appeals matters. We have Board of Appeals has regular meetings on Mondays, and the 40Bs are being done on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. In fact, the Ice House in the East Milton hearings are sharing Thursday evenings. So I think it's one of the reasons why I've been trying not to give up Wednesdays, because you really only have Wednesdays as an option. So that's this board's, or at least my obsession with Wednesdays. Let me hear from the members as to whether or not they have objection to recessing this hearing till 7 o'clock on May 12th.
No objection from me.
No objection, Mr. Chairman.
Hearing none, we'll stand in recess until May 12th at 7 o'clock. Okay.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
all.
time, everyone.
Welcome. Goodbye now.